Montana Territory, 1872. The first snowfall of winter covered the rolling hills of Elk Creek Valley like a gentle blanket, transforming the rugged landscape into something almost magical. Ethan Zimmerman stood at the window of his ranch house, his 26-year-old frame silhouetted against the fading light. The reflection that stared back at him from the glass showed a face too young to carry so much pain. Strong jawline dusted with light stubble, piercing blue eyes that had once sparkled with laughter but now seemed hollow. "Pa, look what I found." His 6-year-old son, Joshua, burst into the room, brandishing a leather-bound book. Ethan turned with a tired smile. "What have you got there, son?" "It's Ma's book," Joshua said, his voice dropping to a whisper. The mere mention of Sarah made Ethan's chest tighten. 2 years had passed since the fever took her, leaving him alone with their 2 children on this vast Montana ranch. "Put it back where you found it," Ethan said, more sharply than he intended. Joshua's face fell, and Ethan immediately regretted his tone. He knelt down and placed his hands on his son's shoulders. "I'm sorry. It's just, some things are better left alone." Just like his heart, Ethan thought. The frontier was no place for love. It took more than it gave. He'd learned that lesson the hard way. All that mattered now was survival and making sure his children had a future. There was no room for softness in the harsh reality of ranch life. Later that night, after tucking Joshua and 4-year-old Mary into bed, Ethan sat at his kitchen table, reviewing the ranch ledger by lamplight. The numbers weren't good. The cattle business was struggling, and without Sarah's careful management of the household, expenses were mounting. More pressing was his children's education. The nearest school was in Riversbend, nearly 15 miles away, too far for daily travel, especially with winter setting in. His friend Thomas had suggested hiring someone to teach the children, but Ethan had resisted. Bringing a stranger into their home seemed like an invasion of the fragile peace he'd constructed. Yet as he stared at the ledger, he knew he couldn't deny his children an education much longer. A knock at the door startled him from his thoughts. Visitors were rare, especially after dark. Ethan grabbed his revolver from its peg by the door, a frontier habit born of necessity. "Who's there?" he called, his voice carrying through the thick wooden door. "Hannah Blackburn, sir. From Riversbend. I believe you're expecting me." Ethan frowned, lowering his gun. He wasn't expecting anyone. Cautiously, he opened the door to find a young woman standing on his porch, snowflakes settling on her honey-blonde hair. She couldn't have been more than 22, her cheeks flushed pink from the cold, her green eyes bright despite the darkness. Her blue wool dress was practical but flattering beneath a heavy coat. "I think there's been some mistake," Ethan said, his breath fogging in the cold air. The woman's smile faltered. "Are you Ethan Zimmerman, owner of the Z-Bar Ranch?" "I am." "Then there's no mistake. Mr. Jenkins from the general store said you were looking for a teacher for your children." She pulled a letter from her pocket. "He sent word to my uncle in Riversbend, who knew I was seeking a position." Ethan cursed under his breath. Thomas Jenkins had gone ahead and arranged this without his permission. "Miss Blackburn, I'm afraid there's been a misunderstanding. I never hired a teacher." Hannah's face fell, and in the lantern light, Ethan could see just how tired she looked. "I've traveled 3 days by stagecoach to reach Elk Creek," she said, her voice steady despite the disappointment evident in her eyes. "The last coach back to Riversbend doesn't leave until Thursday." Ethan felt a pang of guilt. 3 days of hard travel, only to be turned away at the door. That wasn't right, no matter how much he wanted to protect his solitude. "You can stay the night in our spare room," he said reluctantly. "We'll figure things out in the morning." Relief flooded her face. "Thank you, Mr. Zimmerman. I promise I won't be any trouble." As he showed her to the guest room, Ethan couldn't help but notice the way she looked around the house, taking in the dusty corners and haphazard arrangement of furniture. Sarah would have been mortified at the state of their home. "The children?" Hannah asked softly. "Asleep," Ethan replied. "Joshua is 6, Mary is 4. Hannah nodded. "I look forward to meeting them tomorrow." After she closed the door, Ethan stood in the hallway, unsettled by this unexpected turn of events. He'd have words with Thomas the next time he was in town. Bringing a pretty young teacher into his home was exactly the kind of complication he didn't need. The next morning, Ethan woke to the unfamiliar sound of laughter coming from the kitchen. He dressed quickly and found Hannah at the stove, showing Mary how to flip pancakes while Joshua set the table. Good morning, Mr. Zimmerman, Hannah said cheerfully. I hope you don't mind. The children were awake, and I thought I'd make myself useful. Joshua looked up with bright eyes. Miss Hannah says she's our teacher. Is that true, Pa? Before Ethan could answer, Mary piped up. She's pretty, Pa? Like the picture of Ma. Ethan felt his chest tighten. We haven't decided yet if Miss Hannah is staying, he said carefully. Hannah's smile dimmed slightly, but she maintained her composure. These pancakes are ready. Why don't we all sit down and enjoy breakfast? Then perhaps you and I can discuss the situation, Mr. Zimmerman. After breakfast, with the children occupied with drawing, Ethan led Hannah to the front porch where they could speak privately. The morning sun glinted off the snow, nearly blinding in its brightness. Miss Blackburn, I appreciate your initiative, but I never agreed to hire a teacher. Mr. Zimmerman, Hannah said, meeting his gaze directly, your children need an education. Joshua should already be reading. And he will be, Ethan said defensively. When the time is right. When, Hannah pressed, when the ranch is more profitable. When the weather is better. Children don't wait for convenient times to grow up. Her words hit harder than he expected. She was right, of course. He'd been putting off their education, telling himself it was because of practical matters. But the truth was more complicated. I have references, Hannah continued, pulling papers from her pocket. I taught in St. Louis for 2 years before coming west. I can teach reading, writing, arithmetic, history, and even some Latin. Why did you leave St. Louis? Ethan asked, genuinely curious. A shadow crossed her face. My parents died last year. Cholera. There was nothing left for me there. She straightened her shoulders. My uncle suggested I come west for a fresh start. Her loss resonated with him, though he tried not to show it. I'm sorry for your troubles, but taking on a teacher is a significant expense. I don't require much, she said. Room and board, plus a small salary. And I can help with household duties as well. Ethan looked out across his land. The ranch had been his dream, and Sarah's too. They'd come west together, full of hope for the future. Now he was barely keeping that dream alive. 2 months, he said finally. We'll try it for 2 months. If it doesn't work out, I'll pay your fare back to Riversbend. Hannah's face lit up with a smile so genuine it caught Ethan off guard. You won't regret it, Mr. Zimmerman. I promise you that. What Ethan didn't say was that he already regretted it. Inviting a young, beautiful woman into his home felt like a betrayal of Sarah's memory. Worse, it threatened the careful emotional walls he'd built. But looking at Hannah's hopeful expression, he couldn't bring himself to send her away. By the end of her first week at the Z-Bar Ranch, Hannah had transformed the unused dining room into a proper schoolroom. She'd arranged for a blackboard to be delivered from town and had set up 2 small desks for the children. More remarkable was the change in Joshua and Mary, who eagerly awakened each morning for their lessons. Ethan observed from a distance, unwilling to involve himself too deeply. He told himself it was because he had ranch work to attend to, but the truth was that seeing Hannah with his children stirred feelings he'd thought long buried. One evening, after the children were in bed, Ethan found Hannah in the kitchen, mending Joshua's shirt by lamplight. Her honey blonde hair was loosely tied back, with wisps framing her face. She looked up as he entered, her green eyes catching the golden glow of the lamp. You're good with them, Ethan said, surprising himself with the admission. Hannah smiled. They're wonderful children. Very bright. Joshua has already learned his letters, and Mary isn't far behind. Ethan leaned against the doorframe. Their mother would have taught them, if she'd lived. Hannah set down her mending. Tell me about her, she said softly. The request caught him off guard. No one had asked about Sarah in a long time. Most people in town avoided the subject, as if her memory was too painful to acknowledge. Sarah was everything to me, Ethan said, the words coming slowly. We came west together 7 years ago, full of dreams about building something of our own. He glanced around the kitchen. This was her domain. She made this house a home. She sounds remarkable. She was. Ethan swallowed hard. When the fever took her, it was like the light went out of this place. Hannah nodded, understanding in her eyes. My mother used to say that grief is just love with nowhere to go. The phrase struck Ethan deeply. That's exactly what it felt like. Love trapped inside him with no release. Your children need that love, Mr. Zimmerman, Hannah said gently. They miss her too. I know. Ethan replied, his voice rough. I'm doing the best I can. Hannah stood up, her movement graceful despite her weariness. I should turn in. Tomorrow I plan to start Joshua on simple words. As she passed him in the doorway, the scent of lavender briefly filled his senses. Ethan remained in the kitchen long after she'd gone, troubled by the conversation and the unexpected comfort it had brought. The following afternoon, Ethan returned early from checking fence lines. A sudden snowstorm had forced him to abandon the work, and as he approached the house, he heard voices coming from the schoolroom. Rather than entering immediately, he paused by the window, curious about Hannah's teaching methods. Through the glass, he saw Hannah seated between his children at the table, a book open before them. Her finger traced along the page as Joshua carefully pronounced each word. The dog ran fast, Joshua read, his face scrunched in concentration. Wonderful, Hannah exclaimed. Now you try, Mary. The little girl shook her head. Too hard. You can do it, Hannah encouraged. Remember what we practiced. Mary leaned forward, her dark curls falling around her face, so like her mother's. The dog. That's right. Ran fast. Hannah clapped her hands in delight. Perfect. Your father will be so proud when he hears you reading. Pa doesn't like books, Joshua said matter-of-factly. They make him sad. Ethan felt a pang of guilt. Had he really given his children that impression? Why do they make him sad? Hannah asked, her voice gentle. Because they remind him of Mama, Mary explained. She used to read to us every night. Hannah was quiet for a moment. I think your mama would be very happy knowing you're learning to read. It was important to her, wasn't it? Both children nodded. Then maybe by learning to read, you're keeping part of her alive, Hannah suggested. Every story you read is like hearing her voice again. Ethan stepped away from the window, his chest tight. He hadn't considered that by avoiding books, by avoiding anything that reminded him of Sarah, he was actually erasing her from their daily lives. That evening, after dinner, Hannah brought out a book. I thought we might read a chapter before bed, she suggested cautiously, glancing at Ethan. He hesitated, then nodded. That sounds fine. The children settled on the rug near the fireplace, and Hannah began reading a tale about pioneers heading west. Her voice was clear and expressive, bringing the story to life in a way that captivated not just the children, but Ethan as well. When she finished the chapter, Joshua looked up at his father. Can we read again tomorrow night? Ethan found himself nodding. Yes, I think that would be nice. As the children prepared for bed, Ethan helped Hannah clear the dishes. Thank you, he said quietly. For reading? For bringing books back into our home. Hannah smiled, the firelight catching the gold in her hair. Books have always been my refuge. When my parents died, stories helped me escape my grief, at least for a while. Ethan handed her a plate to dry. I've been doing it all wrong, haven't I? Trying to outrun the pain by avoiding anything that reminds me of her. Grief has no rule book, Mr. Zimmerman, Hannah said. We all find our way through it differently. Ethan, he said. Please call me Ethan. The weeks passed, and winter settled firmly over Montana. The ranch became a world unto itself, cut off from town by heavy snow. Within that isolation, a routine developed. Mornings were for lessons, afternoons for chores, and evenings for reading by the fire. Ethan found himself increasingly drawn to these evening gatherings. Hannah's voice as she read became the highlight of his day, a moment of peace in his otherwise demanding life. More than once, he caught himself watching her instead of listening to the story, noting the way her eyes lit up during exciting passages or how she changed her voice for different characters. One afternoon, as Hannah was helping Mary make paper dolls at the kitchen table, a sharp knock came at the door. Ethan opened it to find Thomas Jenkins stamping snow from his boots. Thomas, what brings you out in this weather? Mail delivery, Thomas said, handing over a small stack of letters. And checking on our schoolmarm. How's she working out? Ethan ushered him inside. Come in and see for yourself. In the kitchen, Hannah greeted Thomas warmly. Mr. Jenkins, what a pleasant surprise. Miss Blackburn, Thomas replied with a tip of his hat. I hear you've worked wonders with these young ones. They're natural learners, Hannah said modestly. Thomas turned to Ethan with a knowing smile. And how are you finding our arrangement? Worth the initial reluctance? Before Ethan could answer, Joshua burst in from the schoolroom. Pa, look what I wrote. He thrust a slate toward his father, on which he had carefully printed. I love my pa. Ethan felt his throat tighten as he knelt down to his son's level. This is excellent, Joshua. Your handwriting is very neat. Joshua beamed. Miss Hannah says I'm the fastest learner she's ever had. Does she now? Ethan glanced up at Hannah, who was watching the exchange with a soft smile. It's true, she confirmed. Both children have made remarkable progress. Later, after Thomas had departed and the children were occupied with their afternoon chores, Ethan found Hannah in the schoolroom, organizing books. Thomas was impressed, he said, leaning against the doorframe. Hannah looked up. He's the one who brought me here. I'm glad he approves. We all approve, Ethan said. You've changed this house for the better. A flush crept into Hannah's cheeks. Thank you. That means a great deal to me. Ethan stepped into the room, suddenly aware of how seldom they were alone together. The 2-month trial period is almost up. Hannah's hands stilled on the books. So it is. I'd like you to stay, Ethan said. Through spring at least. The children need consistency. Relief washed over Hannah's face. I'd like that very much. Something shifted between them in that moment, an acknowledgement that her presence had become essential to their household. Ethan wasn't ready to examine what that meant, but he knew he couldn't imagine the ranch without her now. As winter gradually released its grip on the land, the ranch came alive with spring preparations. Ethan was busy from dawn until dusk, managing the cattle, repairing winter damage, and preparing for calving season. Despite his exhaustion, he found himself looking forward to evenings at home more than ever before. One Saturday, Hannah announced a special project. We're going to plant a garden, she told the children at breakfast. Your father says there used to be one, and I think it's time to bring it back. Mary clapped her hands in delight. With flowers? Flowers and vegetables, Hannah confirmed. We'll have fresh produce all summer. Ethan watched from the barn as Hannah led the children to the overgrown patch behind the house, where Sarah's garden had once flourished. He hadn't been able to bring himself to tend it after her death, and eventually, the weeds had reclaimed it. Throughout the day, he caught glimpses of their progress, Hannah kneeling in the dirt, showing Joshua how to pull weeds properly, Mary carefully placing seeds in tiny furrows. Their laughter carried across the yard, a sound that had once been rare at the Z-Bar Ranch. By late afternoon, Ethan's curiosity got the better of him. He approached the garden, where Hannah was now alone, the children having been sent inside to wash up. Looks like you've accomplished a lot, he said, surveying the freshly turned earth. Hannah brushed a strand of honey-blonde hair from her face, leaving a smudge of dirt on her cheek. It's a start. The soil is still good. She chose the spot well. Ethan nodded, his throat tight. Sarah loved this garden. She used to say it was her piece of civilization in the wilderness. Hannah stood up, brushing dirt from her skirt. I hope you don't mind us restoring it. I thought it might be a good way to honor her memory. Without thinking, Ethan reached out and gently wiped the smudge from Hannah's cheek. She went still under his touch, her green eyes widening slightly. Thank you, he said, his voice rough. Not just for the garden. For everything you've done here. Hannah's expression softened. This place has become home to me too, Ethan. The way she said his name sent an unexpected warmth through him. For a moment, they stood close together, something unspoken passing between them. Then Mary called from the house, breaking the spell. Miss Hannah, I'm all clean. Hannah stepped back with a small smile. Duty calls. As she walked toward the house, Ethan remained in the garden, confused by the feelings stirring within him. That night, as Hannah read to the children, Ethan watched her from his chair by the fire. The lamplight cast a golden glow on her face as she turned the pages, her voice rising and falling with the story's rhythm. Joshua and Mary sat at her feet, completely entranced. For the first time since Sarah's death, Ethan allowed himself to acknowledge the truth. He was falling in love with Hannah Blackburn. The realization both thrilled and terrified him. Loving again meant risking loss again, and he wasn't sure his heart could survive another blow like the one that had nearly destroyed him 2 years ago. The following week brought unexpected trouble. Ethan returned from town with disturbing news. There have been cattle rustlers operating in the valley, he told Hannah as they prepared dinner. 3 ranches hit in the last month. Hannah paused in her bread making, concern in her eyes. Are you worried about the Z-Bar? We're isolated out here, Ethan admitted. Makes us an easy target. That night, after the children were asleep, Ethan checked his rifle and revolver, making sure both were in working order. Hannah found him at the kitchen table, cleaning the weapons by lamplight. Is it really that dangerous? She asked, settling into the chair across from him. Ethan nodded grimly. Rustlers are desperate men. They won't hesitate to use violence if confronted. Hannah watched his hands as they methodically wiped down the rifle barrel. What can I do to help? Keep the children close to the house, Ethan said. And if you hear or see anything suspicious, wake me immediately. I will, Hannah promised. After a moment of hesitation, she added, please be careful, Ethan. The children need you. The unspoken, I need you too, hung in the air between them. For several nights, Ethan slept fitfully, waking at every sound. By the fourth night, exhaustion had caught up with him, and he fell into a deep sleep. He was awakened before dawn by Hannah's urgent voice. Ethan, there are men in the pasture. He was instantly alert, grabbing his rifle and moving to the window. In the pale pre-dawn light, he could make out 3 riders moving among his cattle. Stay here with the children, he instructed Hannah. Lock the door behind me. You can't go alone, she protested. There are 3 of them. I don't have a choice. Hannah's face was pale but determined. I can shoot. My father taught me. Ethan hesitated, then nodded. Take my revolver. Use it only if they come to the house. As Ethan slipped out into the gray morning, Hannah closed and locked the door behind him. He moved stealthily toward the barn, using the building for cover as he approached the pasture. The rustlers were busy cutting several calves from the herd, clearly intending to drive them off before full daylight. Ethan positioned himself behind a fallen log and called out, That's Z-Bar property you're messing with. I suggest you ride away now. The rustlers turned sharply at his voice. 2 immediately drew their weapons, while the third continued gathering the separated calves. 1 man against 3. One of the rustlers called back. Bad odds, rancher. I only need 1 bullet per rustler, Ethan replied, his rifle steady. Those are worse odds. For a tense moment, no one moved. Then one of the rustlers fired in Ethan's direction, the bullet splintering wood from the log he was using for cover. Ethan returned fire, hitting the man in the shoulder. The wounded rustler cried out and dropped his gun. The second armed man fired rapidly, forcing Ethan to duck behind the log. When he raised his head to return fire, he saw the third rustler charging toward him on horseback. Ethan swung his rifle toward this new threat, but before he could fire, a shot rang out from the direction of the house. The charging rustler jerked in his saddle, then tumbled to the ground. Ethan glanced back to see Hannah standing on the porch, his revolver steady in her hands. The remaining unwounded rustler looked from his fallen companions to Hannah, then to Ethan, who had him in his rifle's sights. With a curse, the man turned his horse and galloped away, leaving his wounded partners behind. By mid-morning, the local sheriff had arrived to take the wounded rustlers into custody. One would survive his shoulder wound. The other, shot by Hannah, had been hit in the leg and would recover to stand trial. After the sheriff departed, Ethan found Hannah in the kitchen, her hands trembling slightly as she poured coffee. The children were still upstairs, told only that some bad men had tried to steal cattle but were now gone. Are you all right? Ethan asked, closing the kitchen door behind him. Hannah nodded. I've never shot anyone before. You saved my life, Ethan said simply. She looked up at him, her green eyes troubled. I was so afraid, Ethan. Not of shooting, of losing you. The admission hung between them, changing everything. Ethan crossed the kitchen in 2 strides and pulled her into his arms. She came willingly, her body fitting against his as if she belonged there. I never thought I could feel this way again, Ethan confessed, his voice low. After Sarah died, I convinced myself that love was too dangerous, too painful to risk. Hannah looked up at him, hope dawning in her eyes. And now I know that not loving is the greater risk, Ethan said. You've brought life back to this ranch, to my children, to me. He lowered his head slowly, giving her time to pull away if she wished. Instead, Hannah rose on her tiptoes, meeting his lips with her own. The kiss was gentle at first, then deepened with shared emotion. When they finally parted, Hannah's cheeks were flushed, her eyes bright. I've been falling in love with you since that first night by the fire, she admitted. But I was afraid to hope you might feel the same. Ethan brushed a strand of honey-blonde hair from her face. I fought it every step of the way. Loving you felt like betraying Sarah's memory. And now I understand that Sarah would want me, want all of us, to be happy again, Ethan said. She would have liked you, Hannah. Before Hannah could respond, the kitchen door swung open, and Joshua stood there, eyes wide. Pa, why are you hugging Miss Hannah? Ethan and Hannah pulled apart slightly, but Ethan kept one arm around her waist. Joshua, there's something I need to talk to you and your sister about. Can you go get Mary and bring her downstairs? As Joshua ran off to fetch his sister, Hannah looked up at Ethan questioningly. Are you sure? It's so soon. Life on the frontier teaches you not to waste time, Ethan replied. I know what I want, Hannah. I want you to stay, not just as our teacher, but as part of our family. When the children returned, Ethan sat them down and carefully explained that he had grown to love Miss Hannah. And if she's willing, I'd like her to become part of our family permanently, he finished, looking at Hannah with a question in his eyes. Mary immediately clapped her hands. Like a new mama? Hannah knelt beside Mary, her voice gentle. No one could ever replace your mama, sweetheart. But I would be honored to love you and care for you, if you'll have me. Joshua was more cautious. Do you love Pa? Really love him? With all my heart, Hannah answered honestly. The boy considered this, then nodded solemnly. Ma would say it's all right. She always told me that love makes more love. It doesn't run out. Tears sprang to Hannah's eyes. Your mother was very wise. Ethan pulled a small box from his pocket, Sarah's ring, which he'd kept in his dresser drawer since her death. Hannah Blackburn, would you do me the honor of becoming my wife and a mother to my children? Hannah's hands flew to her mouth, tears spilling down her cheeks. Yes, she whispered. Oh yes. As spring blossomed into summer, the Z-Bar Ranch flourished with new life. Hannah's garden grew abundant with vegetables and flowers. The cattle herd increased with healthy calves, and the ranch's fortunes improved under Ethan and Hannah's combined management. They were married in June, a simple ceremony in the Riverspin Church with the children at their side. Hannah wore a new blue dress with white lace trim, and Ethan couldn't take his eyes off her as she walked down the aisle toward him. That evening, after the children were asleep, Ethan found his bride in Sarah's garden, now Hannah's garden too. She was kneeling among the flowers, her honey blonde hair loose around her shoulders in the fading light. What are you doing out here so late? He asked, joining her on the garden path. Hannah looked up with a smile. I was thanking her, she said simply, for creating this beautiful family that I've been blessed to join. Ethan felt his heart swell with love as he helped Hannah to her feet and drew her into his arms. I never thought I'd find love again on this harsh frontier, he murmured against her hair. I was certain that kind of happiness wasn't meant for me anymore. Hannah tipped her face up to his, her green eyes filled with love. And now I know that love can grow anywhere, even in the hardest ground, Ethan said, brushing his lips against hers. You taught me that, the day I found you teaching my children to read. As the sun set over the Montana mountains, casting the ranch in a golden glow, Ethan kissed his bride properly, a promise of all the years to come. The frontier had taken much from him, but in Hannah, it had given back everything he'd lost and more. The Z-Bar Ranch was truly home again.